Welcome to the Inner West Library Australian Music Month Speaker Series. Before we begin, I would like to acknowledge the traditional custodians of the land, the Gadigal and Wangal people of the Eora Nation, and pay my respects to elders past, present, and emerging. Alannah Russack first gained recognition as songwriter, guitarist, and co-lead singer in the Hummingbirds, one of Sydney's and Australia's finest guitar pop bands. After releasing two albums and a number of EPs, Alana now plays in Alannah Russack's Entropy band, Aerial Maps, and as a solo artist. Her debut solo album is set to be released in the spring of 2022. Welcome, Alana.
Thank you.
As a performing musician, what were your favorite venues to play, and what were your favorite venues as a punter in the Inner West?
Well, that was a question I had for you actually. Because I was going through all the venues and I was like, but is that Inner West? I mean, is the Hopeton considered Inner West?
No, that's City of Sydney.
There we go. The Lansdowne,
The Lansdowne, still City of Sydney.
the Annandale,
Yes,
Inner West.
yes.
Well, they were the sort of main venues that we played in those times. So there was a lot of inner city gigs, I guess, but in the Inner West, the main one I remember is the Annandale.
So you never played like Max's Petersham or anything like that?
Thank you for reminding me. Yes, we did. Yeah, Max's Petersham Inn. Yes, I saw bands there and played there. There were some great things on there. The Gaelic Club, was that inner city?
Yes.
Well, the Enmore, that was a really great place. It's still a great place to see bands, and we did play there a few times. Actually, I just did a solo set there last year supporting Rat Cat.
Oh, nice.
Yeah, it was. It was a really good night.
So were they a band that you would see all the time, or?
Well, we did see a lot of each other because we were with the same record company and we had the same management at one point and we did tours together as well. We did see each other a lot. But I mean, that time in Sydney, you could see so many bands in a week that I mean, when I was trying to think about the local scene and just oh, there's so many bands around then that you could say you saw many times. So I definitely saw Rat Cat many times, but I could say that about a lot of bands.
How about nowadays? Venues such as Gasoline Pony.
Yeah, that's what I was just thinking about then. Actually, I was thinking I've played there quite a few times. I'm about to play there again soon, I think, and I mean that's a lovely, great little spot for seeing music and playing. Yeah, there's quite a few venues still able to be played at in the Inner West. I'm just trying to think where else I've played recently that because I think I got a bit confused with the inner city and the Inner West.
Right. You moved to Sydney in the early 80s. Could you describe what the local scene was like when you started?
Oh, very alive. Yeah, that I mean I moved to Sydney to go to art school and to join a band. That they were my goals. And I already got entry into art school, so I just had to tick the next box. I just, loved going and seeing live music because I grew up on a farm and I used to tune in to Double J late at night and listen to my older sisters and brothers records and just couldn't wait and played guitar and learnt classical guitar and then discovered chords and I couldn't wait to get to Sydney to hear it, see it, be it kind of thing. So the scene was fantastic. It was, you just saw bands every night. That's how I remember it. You went out every night, either dancing or seeing bands. You could sometimes see a few bands in the one night. We used to just call it gig hopping, and you'd just go from one place to the next. And, there was the Rock Against Works, and yeah, there was so much on. It's a fantastic, vibrant scene.
I always wondered if the Hummingbirds were kind of a response to, the darkness of, say, bands like the Laughing Clowns.
Oh gosh, I love that band. Yeah, I couldn't say that. I mean, I quite like that kind of dark. I found that band to be very inspirational. I remember seeing them in the at some point in the 80s. Um, yeah, I don't. I think it was more in who we were inspired by. Yeah, like bands like Big Star and those. Well, obviously the Beatles for me,
Hmm.
Velvet Underground, that kind of thing.
Yep.
Yeah,
What was one of your most memorable gigs, and why? What happened at the gig? This could either be one you performed at or saw as a punter.
probably Elliott Smith at the Annandale. That was amazing. Actually, and Henry Rollins' spoken word at the Annandale was incredible too. Yeah, very memorable. I'll never forget those gigs. Playing there too, playing at the Annandale, doing sort of marathon weekends where you'd have a matinee gig and a night gig, and I'd have to be somewhere else in between times. And then I remember I went to a school reunion down the south coast, then flew back to do a matinee show and a night show at the Annandale, and only just made it, and things like that. Yeah, they're memorable. We did our last Hummingbirds Sydney shows before we broke up at the Annandale.
Yeah, wow.
Mm.
And then reformed and played at places like the Manning Bar, which is inner westish as well.
Yeah, well, that was put together by Tim Pittman. He was, you know, doing a run of shows with bands like Ups and Downs and Lighthouse Keepers, and we fell into that sort of run of shows. So we got, yeah, we reformed to do that after much discussion.
Having been creating and performing in the inner west for a large part of your life, what stands out about it for you?
Well, I guess it's standing out less and less. I mean, in the 80s and 90s, everything was much more accessible, I think. It was a more grassroots kind of scene. I feel like that's building again, but I'm not sure. There seems to be a lot of live music around again, but what stood out about it? Is that what the question was?
Yep.
A whole bunch of young people being creative. I mean, there were lots of art happenings and squats where there were just bands set up in the lounge room, or terrace houses where there were huge parties and there'd always be a band set up in the lounge room and you'd just play, and you could just go and see music all the time.
I guess with gentrification, the band squats aren't really a
Yeah,
modern day thing.
or squats. Yeah, just don't. I don't know that they exist.
Hmm.
No, that you sort of watch them gradually go.
As rents go higher.
Yeah, well, I think that, I mean, that's surely surrounding a lot of pubs and hotels. You can't be play past this time and all that kind of stuff. That's just that did really impact
Hmm.
on the art scene, I'd like to say, like that, because it's really related, isn't it? Where there's artists, there's musicians, and where there's musicians, there's artists, probably.
What were some of your favorite inner west bands from that era when the Hummingbirds were coming up, and also now?
I got to see so many bands. I was thinking about this and thinking, I mean, even as we speak, we used to play with them quite a bit.
Hmm.
I remember seeing, I think there was a band called Thug that really blew me away. A band called Feed Time that used to play around a lot. Kiss My Poodle's Donkey. So many. Dutiful Daughters. They were a band that had two women and two men. So I was always really attracted to bands too that had other women in them, because I was trying to link up with other women backstage, on stage, side of stage, whatever, in the audience. Yeah.
That actually leads into my next question. I wanted to ask you what it was like for as a woman in what The Guardian called a suffocatingly macho rock scene. Like, was the cranky sound guy who thought women can't play an issue? Is it still an issue when you play today?
uh, No, I don't. I haven't found that to be an issue. I mean, you get cranky sound guys, sure, just like you get cranky musicians.
Hmm.
You occasionally get one that makes you feel like you can't ask anything of them. Um, Definitely in that time in the, well, when I was playing around a lot in the mid to late 80s and early 90s with the Hummingbirds, it was definitely an issue. Not in some of the venues we played in, it was a very cool scene. Like your friend was the booker, and your other friend was the manager, and your sister was the door bitch, and like we played in a lot of, for want of a better word, she would have called herself a door bitch because she had to be pretty tough to to manage. That's the thing. Like, it definitely, you would be setting up your gear and you would feel the vibe, yeah, from the person on monitors or the person in the audience telling you, asking to see your tits, or yeah, I mean that happened a lot, for instance. Yeah, and see, for me, I'd been playing guitar since I was 7. I'd been playing classical guitar. I'd been performing since I was probably about 4.
Hmm.
So for me to be performing and playing as a musician, it wasn't like I was a female musician. I was a musician as far as I was concerned.
Yep.
So it that did strike me because I my first job was playing music as a 12-year-old. I had a regular gig with my brother playing music every weekend. So it, yeah, when I think about things like that, I think I was always up to fight that.
Stand your ground.
Yeah, yeah, definitely. Well, I didn't feel like I was any less. So if anyone saw me as less, that was going to be a problem for them, not for me. I mean, I did go and punch someone in the audience for them asking to see my tits. And I didn't realize I was doing it at the time, but when I got back on stage, I realized I did it and went, oh, yeah, I shouldn't have done that.
I imagine the crowd would have supported you in that
I
endeavor.
was just sick of it.
Yeah,
I was sick of it. Yeah.
it
Yeah.
must have been hard.
Yeah. And also in record companies, there's a lot of that too. That in the record companies at the time, there was a lot of that feeling, of how they wanted your image to be, sex selling and all that, as it does. But we weren't the sort of people that wanted. I've never wanted to use that part of myself to sell. I'd like my songs and my
Hmm.
musicianship to sell.
Yep.
That said, I love fashion. I love the whole performance aspect of music. I don't care if other people want to do that. If that's how they want to sell their music, I no problem. But when someone is asking me to do that, I have a real problem with it, and I had a real problem with it. So much so that we we pulled a video for one of my songs because of how the video came about and the director, and we just weren't happy with it.
Sounds like it's still an issue nowadays.
Yeah, well, I'm not sure because I'm feeling quite thrilled at the moment when my feed comes up with certain people I follow or photographers I follow. That there's one called the Underground Stage. This guy that goes around and photographs live gigs and then plugs their music and the venue and their latest single and where they're charting and all that sort of thing. There's just so many women in bands. It's so fantastic. Yet I still play on bills from my era of music, and I can sometimes still be the only female on the bill, which is disappointing. But I feel like it's changed. I feel like I'm seeing a lot of bands coming up that are, if not all female, they certainly have a good amount of women in the band.
Do you feel responsible for that? In that you blazed a trail, or
Well, I don't think I ever felt, like I said at the time, I didn't feel like a female musician. I felt like a
hmm.
musician.
Yep.
And I certainly wasn't treated as a female musician by Simon and Mark in the Hummingbirds. Like, they didn't make me feel like that. But of course, I have had people say to me, young women, say that Robin and I were an inspiration at the time for playing in a band, and Yeah, of course. Yeah. But I don't know that I think of myself as, I'm sure I was part of something that encouraged women to pick up instruments. Sure. I'd love that if that was the case, even if one person did it because they saw the hummingbirds, that would be. Because, of course, I looked to people when I was growing up. I was looking like Susie Quattro was, when I was really young. I couldn't believe how exciting she seemed to me, you know, that that's what you could do.
Yeah, like
Yeah.
didn't realize the possibility was there until.
Yeah. Well, I mean, I was a huge fan of the Beatles, but I never saw that I couldn't do what they were doing as far as playing in a band because music had always been in my life. Then when you start seeing Fleetwood Mac were a big influence on me as a kid too, and bands like Heart, and yeah, I always tried to find that. I mean, I think I was inspired by a lot of those kinds of things when I was little.
Mhm.
Yeah.
To go back to the Hummingbirds and that era, when your contemporaries, made it big, and you yourself, you left Sydney to tour, you did international tours. What was the vibe
Hmm.
like when you'd come back to Sydney? Was it still about seeing mates play, like the rise of the half a cow type stuff? Were you embraced by that kind of stuff, or was it you came back from tour and it felt like, time had gone on without you?
Oh, I felt embraced. Yeah, I mean, I was involved with Half a Cow stuff on a creative level. They'd get me into sing songs, or I did recording with Nick at one stage for songs that I think I played drums on a song, and, like we were friends first and foremost. So, uh, I mean, it did feel strange coming back. It definitely felt strange, but I mean, I remember we spent 6 months away at one point and we were in the States and Europe, and coming back after that felt really strange. But then we had an album launch, and you know, we weren't. It wasn't like we were forgotten.
Hmm.
Felt like we were still part. Mind you, that said, we like at one point when you get a little bit of success, you're very busy. So you lose contact with a lot of people because you're touring, they're touring, and you only see each other if you run into each other on tours kind of thing.
Hmm. It's not the regular Tuesday meet at the Hoey or.
Yeah, like you actually are a full-time musician,
Hmm.
and you have responsibilities, and you go to rehearsal every week, and you prepare for a tour, and then you do interviews, and you do TV and all that kind of stuff. So you definitely, it's not like, oh yeah, great, we've got a gig at the Hoey, or great, we're playing at the Annandale. It's a bit like, oh, we're touring for weeks, and yeah, so it definitely changes. And I'm sure I'm sure that there were people that probably bands that probably thought we didn't deserve the success we got, and all that kind of thing too. I'm sure that played into people's minds. So not always embraced, probably.
Your work with aerial maps gives such a sense of Australianness, for lack of a better term. Do you see that in your in your solo work as well?
I don't think so.
It's more universal.
Well, I definitely see. Look, my the songs that I write, yeah, they don't. They're not really like. I mean, Adam, his poetry and his spoken word is very landscape. There's still matters of the heart as well, but very descriptive with places. And I feel like mine is much more, my songwriting is mainly an internal thing. That, yeah, I'm not very often describing external things, I think. Yeah. I mean, occasionally I do, but yeah, I don't. But that said, my role in the aerial maps is to provide a soundscape for a poet, really. So it's very different, a different approach, and that's what I love about being involved with the aerial maps. and with Adam Gibson, I love that that's what I get to do. I feel really, really chuffed that I get to do that.
Is there anything that you've learnt over the years that you'd like to pass on to people starting out today?
Well, keep your passion alive. If you're passionate about it, just keep doing it. Recently I was asked in an interview, and it could have floored me, but it actually gave me loads of scope for thought. And I was asked why I was still doing it. I thought it was a great question to start an interview because I'm still doing it because I love writing music. I love singing. I love recording music. There's loads of aspects about the business that I don't like. But I love the creative process, and it is actually what feeds me as a human. The creative side of life has always fed me spiritually, I suppose. Gives me something to look forward to. I love the whole challenge of writing a song and finishing it and being happy with it and then moving on to when the next song comes up. So I guess don't stop doing it. If it feeds you, keep doing it. It doesn't matter that you're not world famous. You don't have to stop doing it just because you haven't reached the heights that perhaps you think you're supposed to have reached. Or I see older artists that are still performing, and I think, yeah, why should you stop? If you've got something to offer, keep doing it, keep offering it, and people will take it up, you know?
Hmm.
Yeah, but I can't think of anything else particularly.
So that was my last question, Alana. Thank you for
Great.
talking to me today. Thank you for listening, and look out for upcoming digital content through the Inner West Library's What's On social media channels.